Imagine waking up one morning to find that the world outside your window has changed. The sky is unfamiliar, the streets are silent, and every face you encounter carries the same blank stare. You step outside, searching for something familiar, something grounding, but no matter how far you walk, the landscape rearranges itself, bending and twisting in ways you can't predict. You realize with a creeping dread that you aren't lost in the world, you're lost inside your own mind. Now pause. Isn't that, in some sense, already true? You never really leave the theater of your consciousness. You look at a tree, and what you see isn't the tree itself, but the brain's reconstruction of light and form. You hear a friend's voice, but it's your auditory cortex shaping sound into meaning. Even the way you experience yourself, the I that thinks, feels, and acts, is not raw reality, but a story woven endlessly inside your skull. You do not live in the world, you live in your interpretation of it. And here lies the paradox. You cannot escape your mind because your mind is the very lens through which escape would have to happen. To step outside of it would be to step outside of existence itself. But then comes the unsettling question. If everything you know is filtered, edited, and spun by the machinery of thought, how much of your life is truly yours? Consider this. You feel anxious before an important decision. The anxiety colors every thought, every option, until the choice itself feels suffocating. But the decision hasn't changed. It's the same set of facts. Only your inner weather has shifted, and with it, the entire landscape of your life. If your mind can alter reality so completely, who is really in control? We like to believe that our thoughts are tools, that we use them to navigate reality. Yet more often than not, it is our thoughts that use us. They rise unbidden, looping in patterns you never consciously chose. Regrets replay, fears echo, fantasies intrude. The past bleeds into the present. The future casts its shadow long before it arrives. And no matter where you go, there they are, an endless procession of voices, images, and judgments. Have you ever noticed that silence is nearly impossible? Even in stillness, the chatter continues. You might be sitting quietly, yet your mind races. Did I say the wrong thing earlier? What if tomorrow goes badly? Why can't I stop thinking? It is as though you are locked in a room with a voice that never stops talking. And the cruelest part is, it speaks in your own voice. So what happens when escape is impossible? What happens when the prison guard and the prisoner are the same person? This is where the deeper tension arises. You are both the dreamer and the dream. You are the one suffering the storm of thought and the one creating it. To fight the mind is to fight yourself, yet to surrender to it feels like drowning. It is the quintessential human dilemma. The mind is your only home, but it often feels like a trap. And perhaps the most haunting question of all, if you can never escape your own mind, then what does freedom really mean? Is freedom the absence of thought? The quieting of the inner noise? Or is it something stranger, the realization that the prison door has been open all along, but you never knew where to look? Imagine being able to step back, not to escape your mind, but to see it differently, to recognize the shifting stories, the illusions of control, the fears dressed up as truth. Would that be freedom? Or would it simply be another layer of thought, another trick the mind plays on itself? The mere you ask, the deeper the labyrinth becomes. Every path folds back into the same realization. You cannot get out because there is no outside. The self, the world, the meaning you cling to, they are all part of the same construction. So here you are, standing at the edge of the most important question you may ever face. If escape is impossible, what then? Do you resign yourself to the cage of thought? Or do you risk exploring its depths, not to escape, but to discover what lies hidden within the very walls that confine you? This is where the journey begins, not with an answer, but with the courage to confront the great question. What do you do when the thing you most want to escape is the very thing you are? We like to think of the mind as something we control, a tool at our disposal, like a computer we can switch off when we're done using it. But in truth, the mind is not a device we own. It is more like the atmosphere we live in, invisible, inescapable, and everywhere. You don't use your mind, you live inside it. And this is the hidden problem. You cannot leave it even for a moment. The question then becomes, what happens when the very place you live turns against you? Psychology gives us one answer. Philosophy gives us another. Together, they reveal why escaping your mind feels impossible. The psychological trap. Modern psychology often compares the mind to a survival machine. Its job is to keep you alive, not to keep you happy. That means it constantly scans for threats, replaying old dangers and rehearsing new ones. This is why anxious people feel stuck in loops. Their mind won't let them rest, because resting means being unprepared. But here's the cruel twist. When the mind does its job too well, it turns life into a prison. You overthink every decision, replay past mistakes, and imagine futures that haven't happened. You may sit safely in your room, but your mind drags you into wars that exist only in imagination. Cognitive psychology calls this rumination. You tell yourself you're thinking things through, but what you're really doing is circling the same mental maze, wearing grooves deeper with each repetition. The more you try to stop thinking, the more thought insists on being heard. It's a paradox. The harder you try to escape, the more trapped you feel. The philosophical trap. Philosophers saw this problem long before psychology gave it names. Take Jean-Paul Sartre. He said, "We are condemned to freedom." On the surface, freedom sounds good. But Sartre meant something darker. Because we are free, every choice we make is our responsibility. There is no escape from this responsibility. Not even refusing to choose is still a choice. Your mind becomes the stage where this endless responsibility plays out. Every thought becomes a judgment. Did I do the right thing? Could I have chosen better? What does this say about me? Even silence is noisy, because in your head, freedom never leaves you alone. Then there is Carl Jung, who warned that much of the mind is not even conscious. Beneath the surface lies the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we don't want to face. We repress anger, jealousy, fear, shame, and they don't disappear. They wait. And when they surface, we feel attacked by our own psyche. Jung believed that ignoring the shadow only gives it more power. In other words, the parts of yourself you try hardest to escape are the ones most likely to haunt you. Meanwhile, Arthur Schopenhauer went further. He believed life itself is driven by a blind, restless force he called the will, an endless striving that never lets us rest. According to him, the mind is enslaved to this will, always wanting more, never satisfied. You can distract yourself, achieve success, even taste happiness for a moment, but soon enough, the will returns, demanding something else. To Schopenhauer, peace of mind is impossible as long as you are alive. The illusion of escape. So why do we keep searching for escape?
Why do people run to distractions, addictions, endless scrolling, or even spiritual practices, hoping to get out of their head? Because the mind is clever. It whispers, if you just fix this one problem, if you just reach this one goal, if you just learn how to meditate properly, then you'll be free. But the moment you get close, the mind moves the finish line. There's always another problem to solve, another flaw to fix, another future to prepare for. This is why people who achieve fame, wealth, or success often collapse into despair. They discover the mind has followed them all the way to the top. You can change your environment, but not your head. You can switch cities, switch jobs, even switch partners, but you cannot switch minds. The escape you're looking for, total freedom from thought, from shadow, from the will, does not exist in the way we imagine. That doesn't mean hope is lost. It means the problem has been framed incorrectly. The hidden root. The root of the problem is not simply that you have thoughts, or even that those thoughts are negative. The root is that you identify them completely. You don't just hear a voice in your head, you believe you are that voice. If the voice says, "You're not good enough," you don't question it. You wear it like skin. But here's the twist. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them. Thoughts rise and fall like clouds across the sky, but the sky itself is not the cloud. This simple shift, realizing you are the observer, not the storm, is where psychology and philosophy both point, though in different languages. Sartre said consciousness is a nothingness, an open space, not an object. Jung said individuation comes from facing the shadow, not being devoured by it. Buddhism, though not a Western philosophy, echoes the same truth. Suffering comes from attachment to thought, not thought itself. The hidden problem, then, is not the mind itself, but our unconscious submission to it. We treat every thought as law, every fear as prophecy, every memory as destiny. We live as prisoners, unaware the cell door was never locked. The dilemma. And yet knowing this doesn't make escape easy. In fact, it makes it harder, because now you see the trap clearly. The more you try to control thoughts, the more you become entangled in them. The shadow does not vanish by force. The will does not quiet through denial. The prison dissolves only when you stop trying to escape and begin to see the walls for what they are, illusions built from identification. This is the paradox at the center of the human condition. You cannot escape your mind, but you can learn to see it differently. But most people will never get that far, because the illusion of escape is too seductive, too deeply wired. They will keep running in circles, searching for doors that don't exist, while the real way forward is not escape, but transformation.
The harder we try to escape our minds, the tighter its grip becomes. This is the central paradox of human psychology. Control breeds chaos, and suppression amplifies the very thing we wish to avoid. To understand this, we must first explore the strange mechanics of thought itself. When you tell yourself, "Don't think about a red apple," the image of a red apple immediately blooms in your mind. This is known in psychology as the ironic process theory, discovered by Daniel Wegner. The very act of resisting a thought ensures its return, often stronger than before. It is as if the mind rebels against censorship, feeding on resistance like fire feeds on oxygen. This explains why people haunted by anxiety, guilt, or trauma often feel suffocated. They try to push it away or think positive, but the shadows return with greater force. In Dostoevsky's writings, characters are often trapped in this cycle. The more they fight their inner torment, the more it consumes them. Nietzsche, too, hinted at this when he wrote, "Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster." The monster is not only external, it is the distorted reflection of our attempt to dominate the psyche. Philosophically, this paradox points to the limits of human will. The Enlightenment promised mastery over nature, reason over chaos, and progress over suffering. But when applied inward, this logic collapses. You cannot treat the mind as an enemy to be conquered, because you are the mind. To declare war against it is to divide yourself in two, the controller and the controlled, the judge and the judged. This division breeds tension, a battle with no escape route because both sides live within the same skull. Carl Jung described this in terms of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or exile into the unconscious. The more we reject the shadow, the more it shapes us from below, erupting in nightmares, compulsions, and projections onto others. Jung's insight was radical. Integration, not suppression, is the way forward. What you run from controls you. What you face transforms you. Modern psychology confirms this paradox through research on acceptance and mindfulness. Studies show that when people stop trying to suppress intrusive thoughts and instead observe them non-judgmentally, the intensity of those thoughts diminishes. Paradoxically, surrender loosens the grip. The door out of the prison is not brute force, but stillness. But why does the human ego resist this so fiercely? Because letting go feels like death. The ego thrives on control. It wants to believe it can manage every outcome, steer every emotion, and silence every shadow. To surrender is to admit vulnerability, to acknowledge limits. This terrifies the ego. Sartre once described consciousness as a nausea, the realization that we are both free and trapped, aware yet powerless to fully master what we are. To live authentically, one must embrace this tension rather than deny it. And here lies the deepest irony. The more desperately you try to escape your own mind, the more entangled you become in it. The more you try to silence the noise, the louder it grows. True freedom begins when you stop running. This paradox is not merely abstract philosophy. It appears in everyday life. Think of the insomniac who begs sleep to come, only to grow more restless with each attempt. Think of the anxious person trying to calm down, only to fuel their panic with each effort. Think of the perfectionist obsessively correcting flaws, only to feel more inadequate. In each case, control amplifies the suffering. So what is the alternative? To stop fighting. To sit with the discomfort. To let thoughts arise and fall without resistance. To treat the mind not as an enemy, but as a mirror. This is not passivity. It is a deeper form of courage, the willingness to see oneself clearly without flinching. The mind ceases to be a prison when you stop treating it as something to escape. Here we return to the essence of the human condition. You cannot escape yourself, but you can change how you relate to yourself. The monster inside is not destroyed. It is understood, and through understanding, it loses its claws.
If the mind is a prison, the question becomes, is escape even possible? Or is the answer not to escape, but to change our relationship with it? The truth is, you cannot permanently silence thought, nor can you sever yourself from consciousness. The mind is you, but not all of you. The body, the breath, the silent witness beneath thought, all these reveal that what we call I extends beyond the chatter of the brain. To live wisely, then, is not to escape the mind, but to live with it without being consumed by it. 1. The art of awareness, mindfulness and metacognition. One of the most profound discoveries of both Eastern philosophy and modern psychology is that freedom arises not from control, but from awareness. Buddha spoke of sati, mindfulness, as the path to liberation. The idea is deceptively simple. When you observe your thoughts as passing clouds rather than commands, their power diminishes. You are no longer the prisoner, but the witness. Psychologists today echo this through metacognition, the ability to think about your thoughts. Viktor Frankl put it sharply, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Awareness gives us that space. Practical application. Meditation, journaling, and mindful reflection allow you to step back and see the patterns that once enslaved you. By observing, you weaken identification. By naming, you reclaim choice. 2. Acceptance over suppression. Many people attempt to escape by silencing or fighting the mind, drowning it with distraction, drugs, endless work, or noise. But what you resist often grows stronger. Carl Jung warned, what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. Instead, the antidote is radical acceptance. To sit with the chaos of thought without fleeing. To say, yes, this anxiety exists. Yes, these dark impulses are part of me, and yet they do not define me. This echoes Stoic wisdom. Marcus Aurelius often wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." His point wasn't to erase thoughts, but to accept their presence and choose his stance toward them. 3. Integration of the shadow. Escaping the mind often fails because much of what we try to flee are the parts of ourselves we reject, the shadow. Jung argued that the only way to heal is through integration, not avoidance. When you acknowledge your envy, rage, fear, or vulnerability without denial, they lose their monstrous power. They become part of the whole rather than a secret tyrant lurking in the unconscious. Think of it this way. A prisoner locked in the basement screams until heard. Once you open the door, invite him to the table, and listen, the screams quiet. Integration is not easy. It requires courage to face what you'd rather avoid, but it is the path to inner strength. 4. Reframing the prison as a garden. The metaphors we live by shape our existence. If you view the mind only as a cage, you will resent it. But if you reframe it as a garden, wild, tangled, but fertile, you can become its gardener. This means cultivating thoughts that serve you, pruning those that harm, and allowing space for mystery. It means treating the mind as something to collaborate with rather than fight against. Philosophically, this is akin to Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate. Instead of wishing to escape what you are, you embrace it fully, even the painful parts, until they become fuel for strength. 5. Silence as a form of resistance. Though you cannot permanently escape the mind, you can create intervals of freedom through silence. Spiritual traditions across the world point to silence not as absence, but as presence, the presence of something deeper than thought. When you sit quietly in nature, breathe deeply, or even pause before speaking, you realize that thought is not the entirety of life. Silence reveals the witness beyond the mind. This is not escape, but transcendence. 6. Living in paradox. Ultimately, the mind cannot be conquered once and for all. It will always produce thoughts, desires, anxieties. Yet within that inevitability lies a paradoxical freedom. Once you stop seeking escape, you find peace. To live with the mind is to accept its noise while learning to listen for the spaces between notes, to acknowledge its prisons while walking freely within them, to see that you are not the mind alone, but also the one who observes it. Closing reflection for Section 4.
The way forward is not escape, but integration, not denial, but awareness. The mind can enslave, but it can also liberate, depending on how we meet it. The task of life is not to run from ourselves, but to learn to sit with ourselves until even the prison walls become transparent. As Dostoevsky once wrote, "Man is what he believes." If you believe your mind is only a cage, you remain a captive. If you believe it as a path, you may yet discover freedom.
We arrive at the end of this exploration with a paradox. On one hand, you cannot escape your own mind. No matter how far you run, no matter how many countries you cross, relationships you change, or distractions you indulge in, the mind comes with you. It is the one companion you cannot abandon, the one shadow that never leaves. On the other hand, this very impossibility carries within it the seed of liberation. If you cannot escape the mind, then the only path left is to transform your relationship with it. The truth is simple, but not easy. The mind is both prison and teacher. Its endless chatter can bind you in cycles of fear, doubt, and self-sabotage. Yet it is also the very faculty that allows for reflection, creativity, and transcendence. To escape the mind is not to destroy it, but to awaken within it, to rise above identification with every fleeting thought and instead become the witness of its movement. The call, then, is to inner work. This is not glamorous. It does not promise instant relief or dramatic transformation overnight. Inner work is slow, often invisible, sometimes painful, but always meaningful. It begins with noticing. The moment you catch yourself lost in thought, you have already stepped 1 degree outside of its total control. This small awareness, repeated again and again, becomes a muscle. Over time, the observer strengthens, and the thoughts that once enslaved you lose their power. Philosophers and mystics across time have hinted at this shift. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Jung insisted that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Buddhist teachers point out that the mind is like a wild monkey, restless and distracted, but capable of stillness with patient discipline. Neuroscience, in its modern language, shows us that attention is plastic, rewired through meditation, reflection, and deliberate practice. Different traditions, different words, yet all converge on the same truth. Freedom lies not in running from the mind, but in turning inward and facing it. At this point, you may feel the weight of responsibility. To accept that you cannot escape your mind means to accept that the work is yours and yours alone. No savior will pull you out of the labyrinth of your own thought. Others may guide, inspire, or offer tools, but only you can practice, only you can face what arises when the noise dies down and silence begins to echo. This responsibility, however, is not a burden, it is a power. It means the keys to the prison are not held by someone else, they are already in your hands. So how do you begin? You begin small. You pause for a moment in the middle of your scrolling, your worrying, your endless forward rush. You breathe. You notice a single thought. You name it: fear, longing, judgment. You realize it is just a thought. It rises, it passes, and you are still here. The more you see this, the less the mind owns you. Inner work deepens when you bring awareness to the hidden layers, the shadow, the forgotten wounds, the unspoken fears. Here lies the real courage. It is easy to numb pain. It is harder to sit with it. It is easy to chase distraction. It is harder to stay still.
But if you dare to face what you have avoided, if you meet your own reflection without flinching, something remarkable happens. The demons lose their claws. They turn out to be parts of you, waiting not for annihilation, but for integration. This is the final lesson. You cannot escape your mind, but you can befriend it. You can integrate its shadows, honor its fears, and redirect its energy. You can learn to let thoughts arise and fall like waves without mistaking them for the ocean itself. You can learn that freedom is not outside, not in fleeing, but in standing still, in seeing clearly. And so the choice is yours. You can live as a fugitive, always running from yourself, or you can live as a seeker, turning inward with courage. The first path leads to exhaustion, the second to awakening. The first is a cycle without end. The second is a spiral that leads deeper, not outward, but upward. You cannot escape your own mind, but perhaps the truer statement is this: you do not need to. For when you stop running and turn to face it, you may find that what you thought was prison is in fact the doorway to freedom.